Upon earning an undergraduate civil engineering degree in 1974, Doug Barber embarked on a multifaceted 20-year Forest Service career that included being Deputy Forest Supervisor of Arizona's Apache Sitgraves National Forest. In February 1998, after his retirement from the Forest Service, Barber wrote to then-Senator Pete Domenici of New Mexico, a letter that was critical of Domenici's support for legislation favoring federal ranching permittees at the expense of the government's management authority. Barber recounted the circumstances surrounding his letter in this June 2004 interview.
The Apache trout was named as an endangered or threatened, I think, species. And due to not only grazing impacts, but because of intermixing with other fish that had been stocked. And so Game and Fish Department was going into a number of the high country streams there in Arizona and cleaning the area out of the planted fish. They'd build a barrier and then they'd kill them upstream. And this was on the West Fork allotment on the Alpine Ranger District. They were doing an analysis on that for the permit was up for renewal, and so they were doing the environmental assessment for it. And as I said in the letter, even at that time, this was from memory. I can't remember exact numbers, but as I remember, it was 275 head roughly for, I think it was 5 months. And it was high country area where there really isn't a whole lot of good grass, with the exception of the riparian zones near the streams. A lot of the country is fairly heavily timbered. So the cows tend to congregate in the streams, and they break down the banks and so forth. If you're familiar with the southwest area, you go back 100 years, we had meandering streams and perennial streams, and then due to, I think, primarily overgrazing before the turn of the last century, a lot of them have become downcut and widened. So we were trying to do some restoration there for this trout. And we had to get the cattle out of the streams. The solution that we came to after a lot of agonizing over it was we had to fence them. And I kept asking the question, why do we have to fence them? Are we fencing the streams to protect the stream, or are we fencing the stream to protect the cows? It's like the mindset in the Forest Service is multiple use at all costs. If an area, everywhere on the forest, if there's timber growing, you must manage timber. If there's grass, you must manage range, so on, through all the various resources. And they believe strongly in multiple use, and they don't really look at the costs of doing that. You're kind of stuck with some historical use. The Forest Service came in to try and get control of grazing in that area, and they've been working on that for about 100 years. And they keep trying to tighten up on the use and bring in more scientific management and make the use better. But at some point you have to ask the cost of doing this. What is that as compared to the remaining value of the grazing that's there? And my contention was that we'd passed that point a long time ago, and we should really look at the cost of the fencing that we'd have to do to protect the trout, because protecting the trout is a given, versus just removing the cattle. And we weren't at that point willing to take that step. So the purpose of me writing the letter was Senator Domenici was proposing a grazing reform bill, which essentially was going to make it more difficult for the Forest Service to change these people's permits. That was my understanding of the way it was going. It was more power to the ranchers, less to the administrators to be able to get control of these situations. So I was asking, I said, I think you're going in the wrong direction here. Senator Domenici had led the fight for a balanced federal budget, and here he was supporting the continuation of an old industry that was costing us more than it was worth, and thereby driving up the budget deficit. He sent me a reply, which I didn't retain, unfortunately, but essentially all it said was, "We obviously disagree on this issue. Thank you for your interest." And that was it. It was very short. Thanks for your letter. We disagree, which I thought was fine. At least he stated his position. But I felt it was just a dichotomy. You've got this guy who's really good at dealing with the federal budget and saying we will balance this thing, and then he's supporting an obvious loser. But that's politics.